Hello and welcome back to the Data Podcast Season 2. We're finally back and we've got some exciting changes lined up for this season. First off, I'm thrilled to invite our new co-host, Andy Mason. Andy, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me, chaps. So Andy Mason, I started my career 15 years ago as a BI developer, essentially. Fell in love with dashboards and BI tools and data visualization. Then I got really good at that, if I do say so myself, and just got interested in what was happening on the other side of the fence, really. I got sick of trying to make dashboards with crap data models and crap data, so I thought, well, I'll go and make the data myself. So I became a kind of data warehouse developer, data engineer, and then I had the decision to make whether I stay technical or whether I go into the slippery lines of management and leadership. And fundamentally, I like talking more than I like coding, I think. So that took me to management and leadership. And that's where I am today.
Good. And you're a massive fan of pie charts. Is that right?
Huge. Really passionate about pie charts. And that bit is true. I am passionate about them, but it's because I despise them. And they are fundamentally crap.
We need to start serving pies and beer in the podcast, just for Andy.
And I'm from Wigan, right? So we are known as the pie eaters. So that's fine. And I do love a pie, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to data viz, there's just no place, really. So we'll save that for another episode.
Very good. Also joined with Andy Crossley. So you should recognise Andy from the first season of the Data Podcast. But if you didn't happen to listen to them, Andy, do you want to give us a quick introduction?
I will, yes. I mean, if you didn't listen to the first season, then where were you? I think, as Rob Lancashire says, we're back after what feels like a very long hangover, which I thought was a good tip on LinkedIn today. So Andy Crossley, I'm CTO of Oakland, a Leeds-based data consultancy, and I've been at this gig a bit longer than Andy, so a bit more than 15 years, but different sort of background to coming into it. So never coded a day in my life, even though I have CTO in my title these days, but spent most of it doing sort of technology transformation work. So very much like Andy, of trying to help the business figure out how to get the best from technology and data. Nick and I kicked this off, what feels like a very long time ago. I think it was just post-COVID, wasn't it? It was the first episode.
Yeah. I remember, it was just post-COVID. I got made redundant and you said, what are we going to do about the events that we were doing? And we decided to launch a podcast, which, was
That's right.
An interesting journey. So.
Yes, and now we're back with video, which is even more scary.
Plus 2 Andys, which is going to be incredibly confusing for me and maybe some of the listeners who aren't watching the video, but I'm sure we'll get through it.
It'll be fine.
One of us has a lisp, and the other one doesn't. So that'll help.
And for those of you that don't know, my name's Nick Latocha. I'm Global Head of Data and Analytics. I think I've been doing it for about the same time, about 15 years. I have coded. I used to be a BI developer. And then, similar to Andy, chose the route of leadership never looked back since, even though it's probably a bit more challenging than some of the complex coding problems that some of the team face. So,
do you miss it, Nick?
I do. The team have actually blocked my access to some of the technical tools because I end up tinkering and causing problems. So
very wise.
Yeah. They've
I think my team
are which is good. Yeah.
On the verge of doing the same thing as well.
So with all that out of the way, today's podcast, we're going to be diving into what I like to call the holy grail of most analytics teams. So self-service analytics. So we're going to be talking about tools like ThoughtSpot and Power BI, whether they're the key to unlocking innovation and empowering users, or whether they're a recipe for disaster, causing things like data anarchy and disastrous decision-making. we'll probably talk about things like empowerment and governance. Hopefully, we'll be sharing some real world insights and having a bit of a debate about how we can avoid turning your analytics platform into the Wild West. So stay tuned for some lively debate coming up.
But I think those who did listen to the first series will remember that one of the reasons we called this the podcast is Nick and I always had the idea that actually if we could imagine things that where we used to catch up, which was just stood in a pub over a pint shooting the shit, quite frankly. So the podcast wouldn't be a podcast without having a beer. And actually that's how Andy and I met and did the same and now he's here. So I guess without further ado, what we are going to do, and because you can see it in glorious Technicolor now, is see what we are all choosing to drink tonight. So I think we actually started off as the prequel, the behind the scenes, we were all drinking a glass of water, as all good professionals do.
Hydrated.
I'm going to go to Andy first because you're going to christen this.
I've got a corker, lads. I've got a corker. You ready? Oh, listen to that. Okay, yep. So it's called Last Christmas
edition.
Last Christmas. What flavour do you think it is?
Christmas pudding flavour.
I'll give you. Well, So it's Wham inspired. So it's like a Wham bar sour. Remember Wham bars? You used to take your fillings out. As a young
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as bad as a Highland toffee, but still.
Impressive.
I was going to say gingerbread, but yeah, that's interesting.
So if we see you keep squinting, it's because you keep taking a sip and like.
Yeah, it's pretty tangy, that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Nick, hit me. What's taking your fancy?
Well, before we joined, I was saying that I've not drank for a while, so I'm easing myself in gently with a Shandy IPA.
Interesting. I was hoping you go for something a bit stronger, so there's a 50-50 chance whether you'd be pissed by the end of the episode if you've not drunk for that long.
I still could be, it's...
So I'm sticking with something more not traditional but sensible. This is what's been left in the fridge from weekend starter Christmas parties, not work Christmas parties, but home Christmas parties. So cheers, guys. Here's to episode 1 of season 2. So hopefully that will keep us well lubricated and well rehydrated for the episode. So Nick and I were talking about like housekeeping. You sort of kick these things off, and usually if it's a physical event, like there's no fire alarm, fire exits this way, toilets are outside. Don't need to do any of that. But what I did want to do is, what's changed since we last sort of did this. So Nick has yet again collected a Data IQ award. I think ready for the next episode. We'll have them on the shelf behind us. You've also got a new job. So just that's gone. You've literally gone global, I think, with your new job.
Yeah. So in another top 100 list, and then new role. So head of global data and analytics. So it's interesting. It's challenging as well with global teams. They add another dimension to data analytics, which keeps me on my toes. Also,
surely they all have access to self-service, your team, so that's all right.
Well, we'll find out a little bit about that later on, I think.
Good. And then I'm just going to say this. So Andy is also arrived with a Data IQ award. So if David Reed is listening to this, I feel a little bit left out. So if you can see some way to like give me an honorary one, just so I can catch up with these two, that would be great. And Andy's collected an award along the way as well, ready for this new season. So congratulations. That's a newcomer in leadership, isn't it, on the Data IQ?
Yeah, a newcomer that's 40 years old and been doing it for 15 years. So maybe a bit of a fraudster as well in that list, but that's all right. I'll take it.
Yeah, got to start somewhere, Andy. So
yeah, you do.
Maybe we should start like a crowdfunding. We can get all the listeners to nominate you, Andy, and see if you.
Yeah, I need to win something, right? You know, me and the team have been nominated too many times and not walked away with the silverware. You know, I've got more wooden spoons that I know what to do with.
Well, congratulations to both of you on that. So hopefully there won't be such a gap between this and the next episode. That, well, if there's a long enough gap, I might come back with an award. So who knows? 50-50.
Fingers crossed. So today, as I said earlier, we're going to tackle the topic of self-service analytics. And I did a little bit of research before coming on today and delved into the history of self-service analytics. So it's been around for about 15 years. So the topic itself, it started with SAP Business Objects in 2012, and they were one of the first companies, I believe, according to Google, to allow users to manipulate data and visualizations automatically. Since then, I think everyone's familiar with tools like Power BI, Tableau, ThoughtSpot. They're all trying to build these analytics tools that allow people to access data and filter reports and build their own reports. And a lot of companies tout that their data strategy hinges on self-service analytics, or I hate this phrase, but the democratization of data. So to kick us off, I thought it'd be good for us to each answer either one or both of the following questions. So what does self-service analytics mean to you? Because I think some people might interpret it differently. And also, what are some of the misconceptions about democratization of data? Either of you want to go first?
I was waiting for you to say, Andy, you go.
I'll go anyway.
Go on, Mason.
To me, it kind of means two things. Traditionally, in my eyes, if you roll back the years, because like 15 years ago when I started working, I was using Cognos, right? And that was enabling people to basically drag and drop and create kind of ad hoc visualizations on the fly against a curated data set. Yeah. That's kind of the traditional approach that I still think is part of the Holy Grail now. Yeah, even all this time later, we don't really do that very well as an industry, and I don't think the modern tools help. And then the kind of, I guess, in my eyes, the more modern version is where you can then start kind of mashing your own data with curated data sets, or just mashing your own data at will and then visualizing it. Yeah, so like Power BI and that, they all have their own little kind of mini ETLs in them now, where you can start trying to be a data engineer or a data analyst, even if you're nowhere near qualified or skilled enough to do it. So to me, kind of when I look at it, and I've tried to roll it out and done it successfully and unsuccessfully in organizations, it's about people dragging and dropping essentially from curated data sets so that it takes the pressure off my centralized data team.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Andy?
I have quite a different take on it and view it in a very non-technical way, which may be ironic as a CTO. But I started my career in sort of business transformation and process. So for me, what does self-service analytics mean? It's about helping teams around the business analyze what they do to improve. And that might include the tools that Andy's just talked about. It might just be Excel. And if you look at things like Lean and Six Sigma and that sort of stuff, that's all geared around, I guess, more democratizing decision making as opposed to necessarily the data. And actually, if I can put that power in the people's hands that operate the business day to day, some of that is analysis, some of that is working out why is my process crap, or it's broken, or it's not going fast enough, or we're not getting as much throughput, for example. That's self-service analytics. And I think some of the technologies confuse that, because ultimately the outcome or the purpose of it is really to enable those teams that are out in the business to make better decisions and analyze what they do. It's interesting, like what Andy says around the modern tools potentially make it more complicated rather than simpler. I've seen teams do amazing analytics with Excel using lean principles and improve their process way better than an amazing Power BI dashboard can. So yeah, quite a different. Yeah, all the technology is helpful, especially as the business gets more complicated. But ultimately, it's about giving those people the ability to do analysis on what they do day in, day out, for me.
Yeah, makes sense.
Is your view different to that, Nick? Or
yeah, so I guess there isn't really a single definition, because there's different personas or different groups of users that the words self-service mean different things. So if you have a really technical group of people within the organization, self-service could be, I can connect to a database and I can write SQL because that's the quickest and easiest way for me to get the data that I need. Versus you have like a group of non-technical people that actually what they want is a drag and drop interface, like Andy just mentioned, or even like a natural language interface to be able to ask questions of the data. And yeah, depending on the persona, or even sometimes the task that they're carrying out, self-service can mean lots of different things. So I use both of those extremes. We were joking earlier about me tinkering around. I can go and write SQL in Databricks and pull back some data because it's really quick to write a complex query. Or if I've got a simple question I need to answer, I'll maybe go and use something like ThoughtSpot because it takes me like 2 seconds to go and query the data that way. So yeah, I think it means different things to different people, dependent on who's using it and what their task is, basically.
and so why do you hate the word democratising so much then?
Because I don't think it is. I don't think it is democratizing data. I think for me, it's something about, and you said it earlier, decision making and allowing people to make better, more informed decisions. To me, like the democratization of data causes the problem of people just then get overwhelmed with all of the information and all the data that's available.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's just something about the word, just the way that it looks. I don't really like it.
Yes. But you must be experiencing some of this, Andy, don't you? With how you've tried to, I know a bit about what you've set up in your world and how you're trying to, I guess, empower the business a bit. Is that working? Is that a tooling thing?
It's not a tooling thing, is it, really? I mean, like you say, they can do it in Excel. Think about it. If they had access to the data and they were able to do it in Excel, then they should be doing it now, right? They should be coming to me and Nick and you saying, I need access to this data. Can you help me kind of get the insights to make this decision or look into this problem? Yeah. So that's when we get involved. Yeah. In my experience, curating the data sets is a much bigger job than setting up the BI or dashboarding end of it. Yeah. So if you get that right, you get the model right, you can create dashboards in, hours, minutes, and you can answer questions in seconds. So that's when I talk about Holy Grail, that's what I want to do, because we've spent 15 years I've been working in it. The single source of truth gets thrown about still to this day. Yeah. And again, that's another one that no one knows what it means. No one's really got a good handle on this is the single source of truth. Yeah. Because organizations are inherently complex. So yeah, to me, kind of everything that you and Nick said kind of rings true, right? What it doesn't mean is filtering on a dashboard. Yeah, you see this a lot on LinkedIn, and people arguing the toss. We love arguing the toss over what things mean, and we rebrand things every 6 months, even though it's the same thing, which doesn't help as a profession. But yeah, that isn't self-serve analytics really, because we built it. Yeah, and you're just using it. So it's about finding the questions that you want to be able to answer now without having to ask for future development.
That's a really interesting point. So I completely agree with that. The one definition that I don't agree with for self-service is having a suite of reports that people can self-serve. That to me is not self-service.
Yeah, because what did they do before?
Yeah,
did you read them out to them? Do you know what I mean?
Here is your morning report status.
Yeah. Just reading out the numbers on the dashboard of CFO.
Who does self-service really serve? So I've seen businesses drive it from the centre because actually I think they believe that they want to do it because it makes their job easier. But then the business isn't, as in the people on the end of that, at the end of that democratisation, just to annoy you, Nick, aren't ready for it. They're not decision makers. They don't know how to do analysis. Even if you presented it as a perfect dashboard with filters, and to your point, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And go, well, how do I use that to change my process or change my work? So who's it really serving? Is it driven from the centre to go, well, if we haven't got to change everything every 5 minutes and I just give it to you, then my job's done and I just have to maintain the centre. So, the core engineering release train is suddenly a lot easier to manage in theory, and business, fill your boots. And actually I can offset costs because I can tell the business go and recruit their own analysts. But the times I've seen that, I've seen the business isn't ready to do that, or they've not been engaged. So actually what's produced, to your point, what questions are you trying to answer? I'm not seeing that many great examples of the business knowing what questions they're trying to answer. And that's why I think it's, self-service decision making is the goal really. If people aren't geared up to understand what continuous improvement means or how I analyze stuff to then affect a decision, do I pull this lever or that lever? It's irrelevant. But I'm interested to how you guys have sort of, I guess, at different angles come at it from is it a centre pushing it out, or is it the business asking for it, going, well, just give me the data and we can do our own analytics on it?
So I think I've had it from both aspects, where once you start to build up your curated data sets and your data lake, your data warehouse, everybody wants access to that. And one way is to give them access to the raw data. But obviously then people are going to get different information, apply different calculations and relationships and all that kind of stuff. So that's when, having a well-defined curated layer or semantic model really helps. The byproduct of having a curated layer or a semantic model is that you can then allow it to be self-service, because everything is predefined. All of the calculations have been agreed and rubber stamped by data governance. So, I think it's kind of it's the outcome of having a good data platform is that you can then start to enable self-service analytics. I think to your point though, Andy, where it fails is that if you try and kind of push that onto people or teams that don't really make decisions or don't know how to make decisions, then it's not gonna work. They're gonna just be, asking why are you asking me to use this? I don't really make decisions on a regular basis. What am I supposed to do with all this information? So I think finding the right group of people to be able to enable self-service with, I think, is really important. And then sitting down with them and understanding what decisions do they actually make on a regular basis, and how can the model then help them to make those decisions.
And you're doing that, aren't you, Andy, in your day job? You must see that working. How do you?
I think I've done it in every day job, to be honest. it's both ways. Like Nick just said, kind of, as soon as you start getting some kind of level of traction within the business, people will come knocking and looking for data. Yeah. Actually, I don't think there are many. I haven't come across many people that don't have a thirst for data. Yeah. It's how comfortable they are using it in the tools. Yeah. It's taken me a lot of years to, and probably heavy drinking to soften my stance on people exporting it to Excel. Yeah. But fundamentally, that some people will always do it. Yeah. And that'll always be a use case for them to do it. So,
yes.
But actually, if you step back, you're thinking, well, at least they're not extracting data from 4 different systems and trying to mash it together themselves and then do some analysis and then make a decision. Actually, they're using like a signed off, polished data set, that's been put together by professionals. And if they have to do that last kind of mile in Excel, sometimes you've got to bite the bullet, and just let them do it. Some people will want to use the dashboards and drag and drop and build their own dashboards, And I've seen, during my time at the NHS, we had some massive success with business units that had analysts out in them, and they were pure analysts, kind of looking for process efficiencies and all that kind of stuff, but they weren't data engineers, And the data sets and the data models in most transactional systems are, dog's dinners, really, aren't they? So for them to try and pull it all together was nigh on impossible. But by just kind of automating that bit, you're enabling them to make decisions, well, probably twice as many decisions, like 4 times as fast. I've seen it. It's really powerful, but it's kind of both ways. You've got some people that are kind of early adopters, some people that are just, wanting to stay in Excel and stay in the lane, and some people you win over, some people you're not going to, and you've just got to accept it, actually.
I've seen... Go on, Nick.
You mentioned data analysts, Andy. One of the... I don't know if it's a misconception or it's a potential reality, but there's this idea that actually self-service analytics potentially makes the role of the data analyst redundant. I don't know what both of you think about that.
So, I'll try and link it to what I was going to say. So I think it does have a capability link. So one of the things I've seen with some of the companies we've worked with is it's not necessarily the outcome of self-service that drives a value. So to Andy's point, a company sort of wanting to do self-service, if you work your way back through the stack, you need to get your data structured and clean. You need to get to your fast forward to your semantic layer so I can do something with it. And so where I have seen it work is not necessarily it then goes back into the hands of the people that matter necessarily, but it's more that through the exercise of having to create the created layer, we've seen people go, the aha moment is not I've now got a dashboard in an analyst's hand, but now we're all clear on what we mean by the term customer. And just that in itself is a huge leap forward, way more than actually putting the analytical capability back in the hands of a line of business. We've seen that evolve to a place where business benefits have turned into hundreds of millions for a client off the back of that. Because they were able to spot things that they didn't know before because they had miscommunication around definitions of terms. If I use that to answer your question, I think that's why then the analyst role doesn't disappear, because people don't join businesses to be analysts necessarily. They join businesses to be, a head of operations or a warehouse person or a whatever. They don't, you're not going to go, well, you were a warehouse person yesterday, now you're an analyst. Oh, well, we have an analyst to do that, and they will analyze stuff to tell you how to do stuff better, or don't stack the shelves in that way, or whatever it may be. I think the analyst role might evolve, but I don't believe, certainly for a very long time, that step in the process is going to get automated to the extent that the warehouse person just turns up and gets told what to do by a robot. Now, I'm sure there will be a flood of comments that disagree with that, because you can go to fully autonomous warehouses that don't even have a person that does the stacking anymore. Fine. What I've been particularly, I guess, vexed about when you read things like LinkedIn or Forbes or whatever, particularly with the advent of AI stuff, you only ever see those use cases. Everybody gets excited by the autonomous warehouse, but for every one autonomous warehouse, there's a million normal warehouses that exist. And I get annoyed that people default to, well, that's the future, that's where everything's going. It's like, it's not. That's like one of a couple that have led the way and they've invested in it, and they're probably not seeing the ROI for a number of years. Everybody else, in my view, is years away from that. And so, they are, long may the analyst role continue, because I think there's many, many more businesses out there that need it desperately than don't, is my view.
Yeah. And I think, we've had low-code data science tools, AutoML tools for a few years now, and the data scientist role still exists. So I kind of see it as similar to that, as the tool just helps you do your job more effectively or more efficiently. Somebody still needs to do the actual job.
Apparently less sexy than a data engineer now, though. Is the data science role, apparently. Sorry to all those data scientists.
It's now sexy about being a data engineer.
I do like our data engineers. Like they're like the unsung heroes. They're the plumbers in the background that don't really get the same limelight as like a data scientist. But obviously, without them, you'd be screwed. So,
are your data engineers warehouse developers as well, or is that a separate kind of role within it? Because the word plumber, I use that word all the time. Yeah, and in my mind, you've got data engineers that are literally kind of almost like cloud architect plumbers, and then you've got the modelers who know whatever it would be.
Yeah.
Even if it was Kimball, but they know how to speak to customers and understand what that kind of semantic layer needs to look like and how we model the data underneath. Is that like a hybrid role, or do you have separate kind of roles for that?
It's separate roles. So we have data engineers, which are they will build data pipelines.
Yeah,
they will land the data into curated. They'll do some modeling, but then we have analytics engineers that will do proper modeling. So they'll be building semantic layers essentially.
Did you have, so to Andy's point, do you then separate, because I'd add an architect to the left-hand side of that flow. So the people that understand the data model, the different layers of that data model, how that relates to the business again. So you sort of drift into enterprise architecture, but I think the architect is often the unsung hero because nobody wants to pay for architecture.
Yeah.
At least engineers, you can see them building something, and I've got something to show for it. Other than what our architects say, we know we're just here to draw pretty pictures.
I think the heads of data and the global heads of data are the unsung heroes.
Walked into that one,
and the non-technical CTOs.
I'll get that award. I'll get that award one day, even if it's just for you two. But it's interesting you say that, and we have a similar separation to what Nick's just described. But we've started to find, even if we force it into projects, like the architect's a key role, because they're the one that will join it to the other end. So the person consuming it or needing to do the self-service bit, you need the architect to go, I know you're going to build a platform like this, and the creator needs to do that, but ultimately it's got to be designed to answer a question for the business. But I don't know. It feels like that, and the sort of things that they produce, like a data model, are still. I see people on LinkedIn saying, "Oh, there's a renaissance of data modeling." Not sure. I don't know if that's written by data modelers, but it's still a massively unused capability, I think. I don't know. From what I see.
It's not a renaissance of data modelling. It's just been an influx of people that don't know what they're doing. I think, yeah. And basically, because you can throw compute at it, you can build a shit data model and throw some compute at it, and you'll get the answer in seconds.
But do you think that's the? Do you think that's the industry? Do you think that's vendors exacerbating the problem by going, well, "Here's the next shiny tool to solve the problem"?
Of course, that's part of it, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think
data modelling takes years to get good at. Yeah.
Yes.
And the data, everyone's throwing money at data and growing the data kind of teams, and it's shot up, hasn't it? And actually, to meet the demand of seasoned data modelers, probably hasn't got it. So maybe they've done us a favour in the fact that we can turn up to 11. Yeah, with a shitty data model. But at some point, it's going to come and bite you, because you can't. Well, unless you've got deep pockets, you can't run at 11 all the time.
No.
And I think
that's a Spinal Tap reference for anyone listening, by the way. You've never seen
most of them will be too young.
All these old gadgets get it.
Yeah.
Tools like Power BI really haven't helped, because they've made making dashboards and reports a little bit too easy. So I've interviewed people before, and all they know is how to use Power BI desktop to pull in data and do all of the modeling within the Power BI desktop file.
Yeah.
As soon as you start to talk about semantic models and curated data, they're kind of like, what?
SED2. Yeah. They've gone.
And your point, Andy, about the compute. So if the query takes a long time, you just increase the capacity or the compute behind it, rather than one of the main reasons things like Kimball was invented was because there was large data sets, not enough compute to be able to manage those data sets. And that was the solution. If you modeled your data appropriately, it allowed you to process all of that data, but also get all of the insights that you needed. And I think we run the risk now of, actually, because compute and storage is really, really cheap, people are just thinking, well, I don't really need to do this modeling. It's kind of a bit of wasted time and effort. And if I have to hire an architect and some modelers and an analytics engineer, why can't I just put Power BI over it and, as you said, Andy, turn it up to 11 and hope it all runs?
But isn't this the?
I know Lisa will kill me if I don't mention this, but it's cheap from a pounds and pence point of view. But actually, we're chopping down half the rainforest and using half the world's water to cool their data centers or whatever. They're not official stats, by the way. So there is a big sustainability overhead, isn't there, on turning it up to 11 and plastering over the cracks of maybe doing a shitty job.
That's Lisa Rabone for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, Lisa Rabone.
Check her out in terms of her view on the world of the growth of data comes with a dark cloud over it that it's self-producing. That's probably one for another day, actually, because I think it is an interesting debate. But what I was just going to say is what you just described, Nick, is the world of technology is always like that. It will do something that shifts the problem either upstream or downstream by bringing something innovative that can, I guess, refocus the market. So, like you say, compute's like super quick, super powerful. Storage is super cheap, and it's to everybody. It's like don't look over here, look over here. And so everybody's going, oh, that's cool, and they forgot the original problem. And that's just the world over. It will keep doing that until it finds the next thing to reinvent, because all the tech firms will need to hit the next VC checkout and all the rest of it. So until the architecture piece or the data model is such a problem and somebody can reinvent something that gets 40 times EBIT on an investment plan, it's not a big enough problem for tech companies to care about, I think, is my view. And you typically don't have the consumer base. So the self-serve is great because I can put it in the hands of thousands and thousands of people at 10 quid a month. But I think it's really interesting, your point of have actually all these tools perpetuated a bigger problem in terms of the concept of self-service, because all you've done is force the problem left,
Yeah.
if you like.
Yeah, and I think then the tech companies are trying to solve for the problems that the tech companies have created themselves.
Yes.
Because, like you said, Andy, it's Microsoft want to put Power BI in as many users' hands as possible because it's $9 a month for every user that accesses it. Then another company is going to come along and try and solve that problem of having too many citizen developers and lots of disparate data sources and data models, and the cycle just continues to go and go and go, and we end up facing the same problems, which is maybe why we're talking about self-service analytics 15 years later from when it was first started, because the tech companies maybe aren't trying to solve the problem that we're trying to solve. They're trying to sell more licenses.
Absolutely. And it doesn't fundamentally change going back to what we were saying at the start, if the people in the business aren't trained to know what problems to look for, I think what they end up asking for is self-service analytics, because they believe a dashboard will tell them what to do. So if I get a dashboard that has a pie chart on it,
trigger word,
and I just follow the largest segment in terms of that's good or bad, joking apart. I think a lot of people just expect the dashboard to go, well, do this. And it doesn't. You need to interpret that. You need to learn about business processes. You need to know the consequence of, well, if I do pull that lever, what's going to happen? And people are not trained in that. They're trained in Power BI, which exacerbates, or reinforces the buy more licenses, but doesn't fundamentally help the business, which is why I think in the market there's a real oxymoron at the moment around, the tech vendors are going up. There's just more and more noise about that. But there's also this exact same time more and more noise about ROI on data projects, which is an entire topic in itself and one for another episode. But it does seem to be counterintuitive that the world or companies have so many tools at their disposal, so many options available to them, so much data they can choose from, and yet seemingly nobody can find an ROI. So I don't believe that. I think you're just looking in the wrong place, or you're not seeking the right problems. And if you think in sort of continuous improvement thoughts and then use the tools to drive that, they're the businesses that I've seen have succeeded with data, not, well, we've got to do data because everybody else is doing data.
Yeah. And that raises an interesting point. So one of the common problems with self-service analytics is, as soon as I'm going to use the word that I hate, democratize data, you lose the ability to effectively track the return on investment. Because actually, rather than having a data product that solves a specific purpose and you can monitor the adoption and the usage of that, you actually have lots of individuals all answering questions, solving problems, making decisions, all independent of the data team or the data function. So how do you then track the return on investment for self-service analytics when it's democratized?
Some of that must come down to, I don't want to say data maturity, but I'm going to say data maturity because I can't think what I want to say. But at some point, you've got to kind of see it as a sunken cost, in my opinion. Yeah, if you get down the road far enough to say they're making the best decisions possible on the best data, yeah, and actually the ROIs, the fact that they're, whatever that business unit does, they're doing it well, yeah, and the data supports them. It's not that you have to unlock new value all the time, yeah, but if they've got access to the data to answer the questions, then fundamentally they are. Yeah, I always get a bit pissy about this because it's like there's a misconception that the data team is almost kind of somewhat responsible for everyone else's KPIs.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's true, really. Yeah, if you come to us with an initiative to identify the cause of customer churn, then yeah, we'll work with you and we'll answer that question. Or but if they're making decisions based on data anyway now, regardless of whether they're using the data team or whatever. Yeah, fundamentally, you're giving them more. Yeah. So you're automating some of the crap that they've wasted. They waste days, weeks, a year doing. That frees them up to be curious, look for other ways to kind of cut costs or efficiencies in their business unit. They know it better than any central data team will ever know it. Yeah. So I think there's an element of you get kind of down the road to a point and you think, well, that's just part of our operating model. Yeah. That bit of the business uses kind of a curated data platform to empower decision making. Done. Yeah.
Do you think that's an unfair? Like that question is unfairly directed at like heads of data or data leaders as opposed to other senior roles?
So I got asked once by a CEO to explain the value that my team were adding to the company that I was working for, and to be fair, it is a fair question. I couldn't answer it. I was quite early on in my career, and I was kind of like, this is the first time anyone's ever asked me that. So my only response at the time was, have you asked the head of HR how much value HR brings to the organization? So I was kind of thinking that they're both kind of business partnering type teams. They both work with areas of the business. They both have platforms that help them to do their job. But no, I don't think anybody really goes and asks what value of HR driven. So that was my only answer. I think one of the problems is that data teams are expensive, data tools and data platforms are expensive. So you're going to want to know what you're getting for your money.
Yeah.
They're laughing on the other side of their face now, aren't they, Nick? Because you've got 3 Data IQ awards since you answered that question. So
Exactly.
Well, it was a brave answer, actually. That I bet it went down like a shit butty.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like you say, it's expensive, and I've seen lots of different organisations do it in different ways. Where I've seen several that do it in an odd way, where the core engineering, the building of data capability sits in IT, so they carry the cost. And so the data team has very little leverage, but is expected to prove the ROI, which I just find bizarre. So it's like you expecting me to deliver value, but you've given me no means or resources by which I can do that, and then I'm expected to get the business to just adopt it. We drifted into another conversation, but one of the best examples I've seen is where the board say that the question should be back to the board. Well, what are you going to do differently to drive that value? Because if you don't change your behaviours and all sit around and the next time you're doing a board meeting, you're all looking at the same dashboard, why would anybody else care? And so it's quite, I find it quite an unfairly levied question to just say all data value needs to come to the CEO or head of data or whatever the role is. But we will cover that, no doubt, on another podcast, because I want to give Andy a few more beers before we let him loose on that one.
How do you think, just because you've mentioned ThoughtSpot a few times, and I've never actually used ThoughtSpot, but I've always loved it from afar, just from the empowerment of, they seem to be like the first business to crack the kind of typing in a question and getting an answer, and the specific users across all businesses where that is a better option than a dashboard. Although I imagine your data model has to be very tight and the kind of wording around it has to be very tight. But I look at Power BI now. I can't remember how long ago Microsoft bought OpenAI. So I don't understand why they don't have the world's best kind of Gen AI text-based like analytics Q&A known to man. If you ever use a Q&A in Power BI, it looks like a sixth form project. Yeah,
it depends what you're querying, though, doesn't it? So I know Gen AI is generally pretty bad at actually interrogating the underlying data set. So the actual structured data model, it won't be very good at analysing in the way you just described. What it can do is interpret the graph in Power BI, but that might not give you the right answer.
So probably going to sound a bit like a ThoughtSpot salesperson here, and
this episode is not sponsored by ThoughtSpot.
I'll be in touch with them to collect some royalties afterwards. The reason why it works so well is that they were doing natural language search before Gen AI really took off. So they have a model that takes a natural language question, converts it into keywords, and those keywords then perform a search. So when all of the stuff with Gen AI kicked off, what they then did is just layered the Gen AI kind of interface on top of their existing natural language keyword search. So it just made their existing technology even more powerful, even easier to use. Versus, I don't know how Power BI do it, but they've just not got the same algorithms or the same modeling that ThoughtSpot have that make it work in the way that it does. And don't get me wrong, like all of these things, you've got to have well curated data, and it's got to be structured in the right way, otherwise it won't work. But I just think the whole way that they positioned it, in the fact that search was the interface, not here's a dashboard interface and search is on top of it. I think that was the differentiator versus Power BI, which is like dashboarding and reporting is the main aspect, and we're going to tack on this thing called Q&A that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work.
And that probably comes down to, go right to the start of this, in your opening question of the definition of self-service analytics, because you said self-service analytics as opposed to self-service. That comes down to a definition of not just self-service but analytics as well. And so to different people, analytics will be ask a question and get an answer. To some people, analytics is sitting there and tearing through a data set till midnight to actually understand the patterns in the data. Both analytics. Some people will sit there and do process reviews to understand sort of Six Sigma on a process efficiency curve. God love them. But yeah, it's different strokes for different folks in terms of what analytics means to them in their job. So it is quite interesting. I do again one probably for another session, that whether the emergence of generative AI will change the concept of self-service analytics going forward because of what it can potentially do.
Yeah, I agree. And I wonder if
I always wanted these. So go on, Nick.
No, go on, Andy.
I always wanted this conversation to end up being something, there being a takeaway for some people listening that are struggling with rolling out self-serve analytics. So I think at some point in the next whatever minutes, we need to kind of come up with some top tips from our experience of how we did it well and how we bombed out, because the data analytics community, the conferences and all that kind of stuff, I never go to speak to vendors. I go to listen to war stories, and learn from the best. I'm not saying I'm the best, and neither is Data IQ.
Just one of the best.
At least we've got the awards to back it up, and
well, not all. Okay. That's why I'm drinking so much.
So that's a good prod, Andy. So why don't we try and reflect that back then? So that's been quite a romp through, I think, everything from like a definition to sort of what we've seen proliferate the market, to what's accelerated it, to where it's come from, through to, is there a difference between central teams sort of feeling like they're letting go of too much control and passing that control to the business versus doing it because they want to control more, and how those, there's different tools that I think service self-service analytics, but appear at different stages of the stack. So if we took a step back and sort of thought about the takeaways, for me personally, it's about thinking more around the team at the end of that process, though, are in the business day in, day out. What is it they need to analyse and what for? What are they actually going to do with it? I believe there's so many great tools out there and so many options. That's not necessarily always the problem. It's do you understand your business well enough? Do you understand your processes well enough? And therefore, what questions should I be asking to improve what we do? And I can choose whatever tools I need to stack up behind that. But I think that for me is one of the bigger takeaways of where would you start? Self-service has got to serve somebody, and that is usually the business. So do they understand what they want?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I would agree, finding kind of a reason or a purpose for self-service, I think is probably the first step. I think my other kind of takeaway or bit of advice is I would, because I know how hard it is to prove the value through when you implement self-service, I would also find another project which you can demonstrate value quite easily with, so that you can essentially try and fund the investment that you need to roll out self-service, because it can get very tricky and very challenging trying to demonstrate the value of self-service if you're just doing that on its own. So yeah, have another project which I think you can clearly demonstrate value with to then back up or like fund your self-service project.
Mr. Mason, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say the times I've done it the best is when I've spent loads and loads of time as a developer with that business unit, and I understand what they do, what their pain points are, the kind of questions they're trying to answer, the kind of reports they already do, and you design that data model and data set accordingly. You've also got to think for them. Now, the thing that people don't understand is when people extract from an operational source, that could be only 30% of the data that flows through their business unit. They've probably never seen the rest of it. And suddenly you do. So when you're looking at these reports that they've done, and it's like, a lot of the time you see like stage gates between dates. Oh, it took this to this, it took this, we put it on the market then and it sold then. Yeah. And maybe that's all they've ever seen. But actually went to the estate agent then, they pissed around for 4 weeks, blah, 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 think, actually, did you know this? And like, you see, like you mentioned it before, I used to refer to it as when the BI penny drops and their eyes light up when you start talking to them and you say, if you drag this and drag this, they'll tell you who's taken the longest. And it's like, poof. But that only comes with really getting into bed with the business units. And as boring as it sounds, documenting the hell out of the data model so they know what all the fields are for dragging and dropping. Yeah.
Agreed.
And also having a bit of a support wrapper around them. Fundamentally, if you're doing a bit of a hub and spoke model, the spokes are part of your team, really, as soon as you implement them. So you should treat them like that.
Yeah. Good. Hopefully that's given, as you said, people something to sort of take away and go, right, I can try something, or I can apply that tomorrow.
Yeah,
definitely. They can fast forward the first hour.
Yeah. You just get to 59 minutes and you got your takeaway.
Maybe we should Andy. Do that next time. Just record the takeaways and just get pissed. So after that lively debate, I think it's time to have a little bit of fun. So I'm about to start a game called Would You Rather Data Edition. So if you've not played Would You Rather before, I'm hoping most people have. We'll present two hypothetical scenarios, both equally challenging, and you'll have to choose one of them and explain the reason why. So, for example, would you rather have messy data but full executive support, or clean data with no buy-in at all? So that's the example that was in the notes. So we're obviously not going to do that one.
So Nick, just before you move on, so for people listening that've heard the game, it's usually things like, would you rather arms like a sparrow or feet like a penguin? Is that so?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not going down that route. We're sort of semi-work related.
Do the sparrows in Leeds have arms? Because I think we need to go to the RSPCB here about what's going on down.
I'll ask ChatGPT after this.
So, who wants to go first?
I'll try.
Okay.
I don't know what's coming. Like genuinely, what's about to be asked though.
So, would you rather, Andy, be stuck using Excel for all analytics, or have unlimited tools but no one in the team to use them?
Personally, I would go for the former because at least I can use Excel, despite my title suggesting otherwise. And actually, you can probably do quite a lot with Excel and pass that out to other people to use, I think.
Mm-hmm. I used to, when I worked for RBS, I used to be known for being an Excel wizard. And it was a blessing and a curse, because I used to get daily emails from random people saying, "Oh, can you help me with this VLOOKUP?" or "How do I do this formula?" But then at the time, it was also quite cool being like an Excel geek. But yeah. So, Andy Mason, would you rather deliver insights that are accurate but completely ignored, or insights that are wrong but drive impactful decisions?
Does it include pie charts?
I should have done a pie chart one.
Should have done a pie chart one.
That's a good one. I like that one.
That's minging that. It's absolutely minging. I'm gonna go the latter. Because fundamentally, if no one uses it, it doesn't matter how good it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they're making the right decision. That's my only concern. Yeah. The share price is dropping as I talk.
Remember, Andy, it's not all, the ROI is not all on you, remember?
Yeah. No, yes, apparently. Yeah, I'd go the latter. As long as people are making impactful decisions, I'm taking that as a positive. But the data's not perfect. I'm okay with that.
But they're maybe making wrong decisions, and
if they're making wrong decisions, I don't think that was clear in the question.
Okay.
I'm going to have to plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Right, Andy Crossley, would you rather discover a critical data breach on a Friday evening, or face a system outage when your organisation's annual reports are due?
Probably the latter.
Oh, no.
I think.
There was a hidden meaning, and it was more, do you care about yourself or the business? And you chose yourself, I think.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, mainly because I never, ever want to face a data breach, primarily. So
okay, yeah, fair enough.
Mainly because as a business, we often sit there and go, one of our highest known corporate risks is a data breach, whether it's us, unlikely, less impactful, or the data of our customers that we deal with. So avoiding that one would be preferable, even if I have to deal with a system outage on annual report day. I can always make something up on annual reports, just like you said, Andy. If it's inaccurate but using it's irrelevant.
Just send them last year's numbers.
Yeah. I got this report from Andy Mason. It's fine.
times by rand between 0.1, 0.2.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
when they say who's Andy Mason, I'll just say he's the BI guy. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, fine chat, dude.
Yeah, data breach. I would like to avoid at all costs. So.
Yeah, fair
That's a
enough.
good call out.
Have you seen the Ashley Madison documentary on Netflix, by the way? Have you watched that?
No, and I need to now.
Do you remember Ashley Madison?
Yeah.
It's like a dating website for married people.
Yeah.
And that is about, like, essentially they got done by a data breach. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a great little documentary on Netflix. I'd highly recommend it.
Because it didn't expose like all the people that are having affairs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you know about that documentary?
I've been married that long, pal. That's right.
So save the stick.
Last one, Andy. Yeah. Would you rather spend? This is quite related to what we've just been talking about. Would you rather spend an entire year justifying the ROI on your data strategy, or spend an entire year firefighting ad hoc data requests?
Definitely the former. Definitely the former. Ad hoc data requests are, the death of any kind of data analytics team. Yeah. And actually, if you're getting that many, you need to get these self-serve analytics sorted out. Or you haven't done the modelling and the data bit right. But
or get 100%. Out of Dodge. Surely, if you're a CTO, a CDO with the first one, and you're doing that for a year, you've only got about 18 months to go before you change roles anyway.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
just see it out.
That is a slog, isn't it? I mean, we've all done that. I still do that it is. We might not be responsible for delivering value, but we're definitely responsible for communicating a lot of it. Yeah, it does fall on us.
I like that as a takeaway. So as a strat line, I mean, you're not necessarily. It's not necessarily your role to deliver all the value, but as a head of data, it's definitely to communicate about the value.
Yeah,
it's going on LinkedIn in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Get it on there.
Yeah. So I think last time we did a little game at the end, and I think the Would You Rather Data Edition, I think it's going to become a new thing and start to stir up some interesting debates. And certainly, if we try and keep it topical, we've been scouring things like LinkedIn in the lead up to this to sort of understand what topics are prominent. But I think it'd be interesting to get people's views on how you would answer those questions. In the footnotes of this, like, would you answer those any differently? Are you actually dealing with any of those right now? And has our answers changed your mind at all? I hope not too much, because then you might hold us accountable for that decision. But so this is our first episode back at it. We've got stuff planned. We will sprinkle this with guests like we did last time. But the whole purpose was to get the three of us really sort of chatting through mainly what's bugging us in the data market. So there will be more coming around, not just hot topics, but genuine things that are annoying us right now. And I think, as you hopefully see, sort of even from this episode where we start with self-service analytics, which sounds like quite a narrow view, for me, one of the reasons I find the data industry so interesting is you just go all over the place. It just affects pretty much everything that any business does these days, which is why it's so interesting. It's so varied, it's so wide. Where you start at self-service analytics, you end up talking about AI and then touching on data models and infrastructure and all the rest of it. So we've got more to come, guys. Of the things that I've missed, that I've been trying to sort of make notes as we go. But what have I missed? What are the things that are landed with you in this last hour?
So I think it is a challenging topic. I think there's no I don't think there's a right and wrong way of doing it. I think there's different perceptions of what it is and what it isn't, and I think it really boils down to what it means to the actual organisation and what they're trying to enable.
Yeah,
I would definitely echo that as well. We argue the toss about what it is rather than actually in your organisation, in the environment you're in, what does it mean to you and the people around you, and how do you get it done?
Yeah. So it'll also be interesting for people to share what their views of self-service is. So we have a LinkedIn page, which is the Data Pubcast. That's where we'll be posting things like polls. So there's a poll that we ran just before this episode to get some insight. So yeah, feel free to share your ideas. If you've got any topics that you'd like us to discuss, also post them on there. And as Andy says, if you've got answers to the Would You Rather Data Edition, feel free to give your responses on there as well.
Are you going to put them on as polls?
Yeah,
you should definitely put them on as polls.
On a poll. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Even get people to see if they are dealing with live Would You Rather different questions. See if we can answer them for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
A would you rather, but they don't really have a choice because they're actually dealing with it in real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's only one answer.
And obviously, this is my first ever episode. Thank you for having me, boys. And it's the first episode with video. So we are on YouTube, or we will be on YouTube. So feel free to leave a comment and a review on there. Say hello. Let us know what topics you want to cover. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll point, so Nick feels pressure to put the bits on, but I don't know if we've got that technical ability yet. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.
More to come. Plenty more episodes in the pipeline. If you've got views on who you want us to bring on as guests as well, so I know a lot of podcasts still these days they'll bring on guests. That's often driven by the people that are listening and tuning in and watching on YouTube to sort of tell us who they want to hear from. My view on this is always, I challenge people out there listening to come up with the most random guest. I personally find that a lot of the podcasts seem to just cycle through the same guests all the time. So let's try and mix it up a bit. Let's try and bring some new voices into our world. I think to Andy's point, let's hear from the genuine, warts and all stories, not the shiny case study versions of these stories. I want to hear where it goes wrong as much as where it goes right. So my challenge to people out there is come up with the most random guest you can think of. Can't promise we'll get them on. We'll do our best, but I think some of the best podcasts I've heard from other walks of life that I listen to, the guests are the least sort of expected ones, and the ones that will talk sort of much more from the heart about what they're dealing with, why it's hard, why it's good. So yeah, come up with your ideas, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.